Good morning, Saturday morning, on my way to work. Yesterday was a lot of fun since we were off for the 4th of July on Thursday. Then we got to work like 11 hours yesterday. It's the way it always works. Not so much fun in this, with the feels like temperatures like 105, 110 degrees, you know. Be nicer if we were over by the coast. A little bit cooler with that ocean breeze, you know. Oh, the Orlando Gun Show this weekend? All right. In that billboard back there. Might have to check that out. Or maybe it's next week. I can't see the dates right now. But I wanted to talk about men as victims. Because a lot of victimized men in the world. To hear them tell it. I saw something yesterday from someone talked about in his experience over many years that women never, he used the word never want to take responsibility for a breakup. So they always just make themselves insufferable until the man finally has had enough and calls it quits, you know, and that way they can blame the man for everything. I don't know, most breakups, there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides, you know. Maybe there are perfect, blameless people out there who have taken care of all their obligations and done everything they should have been doing 100% right. And it really was never any of their fault at all, but I find it kind of hard to believe. Usually, you know, breakup is a result oftentimes of just two people who should have never been together in the first place, you know? And they ignore the warning signs or whatever. And eventually, you know, their individual personalities and problems and failings come out and they end up breaking up, you know. But of course, there's always a blame game. In my past, I've had some just outright slander and backstabbing and lies going on that it's not fun. Not fun to have to deal with that kind of stuff, you know. But I could always look back too at any breakup and see where I had done things wrong. You're always, it's always two sides to every story. And a lot of men, they just don't want to let on any more than the women do. You know, of course it wasn't their fault. They were a victim of everything. The wife did everything wrong. But we see this a lot today. A lot of the, a lot of the problems we have with, men wanting to move overseas somewhere where they don't have to deal with Western women and all of that kind of stuff. You know, the men are just victims. And they can point to some legitimate complaints. You can point to, even in our legal system, divorces and so forth, that the woman has traditionally, at least, been given primary consideration when it comes to getting custody of the kids, perhaps, or getting support in the aftermath, and having the husband sending them money for child support and things like that. And let's face it, women can be mean, evil creatures. But think of all the things that men do to women too, you know. A lot of men make their wives' lives insufferable. Or, they become insufferable to their wives. And then they want to, when everything's broken up, then they want to act like it was all the wife's fault. So there's plenty of blame to go around. It works in both directions. A lot of these men, talking specifically about people who take off, say, for the Philippines, since that's my primary area of interest. You see the way they act when they move over there and their behavior. It's one thing that, one of the lessons that you learn in writing, people always talk about character versus action, as if, character development is something independent of action. And really, Action is character. You are what you do. You may be saying one thing, preaching another thing, but what shows your true character and what you really are is what you do. A lot of times you see people who maybe they get out of a relationship and they start going crazy, wild, hanging out at the bar all the time, getting drunk, chasing women, hanging out with other guys who want to act like little children. And it's not that behavior, what they went through changed them. It's just that being free of the constraints that they had to deal with in that relationship freed them to be what they really are. Life does change us, that's true, but life also reveals what we really are. Y'all, back in here by the Starbucks this morning, maybe get some more caffeine. But these guys, they go to the Philippines, and you see the way they act, like basically very childish. A lot of guys these days, they want to run around, hang out with their friends, play video games like they're still a little kid with no commitments. And then they wonder why a woman wouldn't be thrilled to have to deal with that in her life, The whole idea that you have even in like the Bible about, the man leaving his father and mother and cleaving to his wife and they become one flesh and all of that. The way a lot of guys approach these relationships or marriage or whatever, sure, there's a lot of nice guys that are really trying their best to make their wife happy and provide. But we all have failings. And a lot of times we don't really do the kind of job we should have done. And I can say that from personal experience, especially my first marriage long, long ago. I wouldn't want to go back, because, I have no desire to go back and relive my life and be in any of the situations I was before. But certainly if I could go back, if I was back there today, knowing the things I know now, I'd like to think that I would have done a better job of things. It's probably good that I didn't, because, I would still be with the person maybe, which I don't have any desire to be these days. But, we can all look back in our past and think of things that we should have done better. It's not just that our wife should have done this better or that better. Maybe they should have, but that doesn't mean that we were doing everything perfectly. There's never just one side of the story. But so many men, they want to act like they are being victimized by Western society and by the women of the West and all of this, and just women in general. Like the one comment I was talking about earlier, the women never want to take the blame. Well, maybe it's not always the woman's fault, Sure, they do things sometimes to kind of force your hand, but a lot of times that's because you're in a situation where you both know it's ending anyways, and maybe neither person is really wanting to take responsibility for it. But why I wanted to talk about this subject, a lot of guys, they want to act like everybody else is always playing the victim card. And, this group or that group of people, they want to be viewed as the victim because of their skin color or their gender or whatever. And yet, those are the very same guys that you see going to the Philippines and sitting around whining about what victims they are. That just, it's not a very good look, If you're complaining about other people doing things, then you shouldn't be doing it either. We used to laugh about this one guy I worked with a long time ago in the post office, always talking about all these freeloaders and everything. And he, anytime he had any extra work to do at the post office, have a little bit of extra mail or something, he was raping the post office for 10 hours because he just couldn't get done, And then the rest of us were out doing his work for him. But he was one of those people who was always sitting around listening to Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and all those people, and whining about how everybody else in the world was a freeloader and didn't want to work. But there's a lot of people like that. It's so easy for us, all of us, to look at other people and point out the things that they are doing wrong and think about all their character flaws. And many of us, even while we're talking about those things in others, we are exhibiting the same exact character flaws. So we have to be careful, you know? Sitting around whining about how everything in our life is everybody else's fault is just not a good thing to do. You know, playing the victim like that, especially if at the same time you're wanting to be a man and tell everybody else how manly you are and how everyone should respect you. It's just not a good way to behave.